Hello, this is Todd from the instrument panel, and I wanted to give you a little run through of the back of the PanHandler today. So let's flip the sucker around and have a look, shall we? Okay, so the first section over here is the triggering section. So we have some things we can do. Some of these, if you've watched some of the other videos, they might be a little bit familiar. On the front of our PanHandler, we have the switch that tells whether we're going to use our audio as our triggering signal. If we turn that off, we could do things like use the gate. So typically what I'll do with that is just use a matrix, and let's do it not auto routing it. I'll hold down shift, and let's go ahead and send this gate signal to the gate in. And if I run this, we'll see then this thing's going crazy. We're getting a lot of triggers, and some of them are accepted because once a pan completes or gets far enough along, it'll allow a new one. If I put this retrigger setting all the way up and I set the, let's see, what are we at right now? We're at quarter notes. If I set this matrix to run at quarter note speed, then every time we get a gate, we'll do a new pan. After that, we have this allow chords switch. That has to do with when we're using MIDI notes. So I'm going to disconnect the gate in. And just for fun, so we can see and hear things, I'll go ahead and combine all this stuff. And I'm going to go to the programmer, and I'm going to tell it, well, actually, let me show you this first before we do that. If I just choose the PanHandler as what's receiving my signals from my MIDI keyboard, then you can see I'll hit a key on my MIDI keyboard, and that lights up the trigger because we're getting MIDI notes. Now, now let me make it so that we're sending MIDI notes to both the subtractor and the PanHandler. That way we'll be able to hear what's going on. So I'll make this the focus of my MIDI keyboard. And now when I play a sound on the MIDI keyboard, we'll hear sound, and we'll also see the trigger. And if I flip this around, you can see right now allow chords is on. And that means if I press one note and then I press another note while I'm still holding the first one, I'm not going to get any new triggers until I let go of all the notes. And then, so every time I release all the notes, then I'm ready to accept another trigger when that switch is on. If I turn that switch off, then every time I hit a key, I'll get a fresh trigger. Again, the retriggering setting will, or I won't say again, but if you've watched the other videos, you'll know if I set this up high, a pan has to complete before I'll accept a new trigger. So like in this case, if I press 3 notes, I'm just going to get one pan, right? Even though they're not exactly at the same time, or even if I go like this, I only get one pan because those other note presses are happening before I'm allowed to retrigger another pan. But if I make my pan time quick, or if I hit my notes more slowly, let's do a little bit of both. Now you can see every time I hit a note and my other pan has finished, I can get it to pan even though I'm still holding the other notes. That's what the allow chords switch does. So turn it off, and every single note will be a trigger. Turn it on, and only notes that are pressed when no other notes are already down will be triggers. We also have a switch here that is called trigger when silent. This has to do with when we're using audio for our triggering. So, okay, when I turn the switch on, you may remember, it doesn't matter that I'm sending MIDI notes to this. That switch has priority. So when this is on, we're going to use audio to trigger our pans. And so the meter lights up. Let's see, how can we... Okay, actually a better way to illustrate this would be, I'm going to go ahead and use the matrix. I'm going to send a gate signal for triggers. I'll turn off the audio so that we're using our gate as that. Now, if I flip the switch to trigger when silent and I turn that off, now you'll notice this isn't going anymore. I'm sending gates, but this isn't moving. It's because there's no sound coming in. It'll just shut that part of it off. It's not going to use your CPU. But if I make some sound, then you'll see it's panning. And it's going to do that for a little while. It's got to wait for the delay, wait for that to pass to decide whether it's really silent or not. So, but internally, it's always checking to see, okay, do we have any audio coming in? If not, we're not going to do all this extra processing that we need. So if I go ahead and put the delay at a short amount, then you can see after I send some sound in, it doesn't take long before it says, okay, we're not making any noise anymore. No need to keep processing these pans. That's what that switch on the back does. So if you want to save a little bit of CPU cycles, you could flip that down. If you want, somehow you want like your left to right to be consistent with time or something like that, you can leave that on, and then this will always be moving. Then we also have an alternate audio input, which says, do I want to use the audio that I'm processing to decide when I should trigger my pans, or do I want to use some other signal for that? That's, of course, if the audio switch is on. So as an example, right now when I play sound and it detects something, it's going to trigger because of that sound. But what if I want to do it some other way? Maybe I want to do something more regular, or I have maybe I want it to respond to my drums or something like that. So just as an illustration, I'll go ahead and throw a redrum in here. That's how I say it. We'll go ahead and create a mixer channel so we can hear what's going on. And I'm just going to throw a bass drum hit on one, and we'll run that. And there's our bass drum. Okay. Now I'll take the right side of that. Let's use that as our alternate audio. Now, if we watch here, that's what's deciding. We're going to, our threshold, our deadband, our release, they all matter, but we're actually using this signal. So I can play what I want on the subtractor. Let's get that going. But it's doing. So now it's synchronized with that kick drum, or whatever you might want to do with it. You could have a lot of fun with that. You could have it go at. Now we go. Man, okay, I have a song idea now. All right. I hadn't done that before in my tests exactly like that, but so you could see, you could have some fun with that. You could make the stereo signal respond to something other than, just the audio that's coming in. I think that's a pretty cool capability. For now, I'll just turn that off, and let's take a look at our CV inputs. So in general, actually, before we do that, let me just mention the gate out right now, because we have a gate in here. A good way to illustrate some of this is to go to Utilities. This is a great free rack extension from Pongasoft, the CVA7 CV Analyzer. I'm going to drop one of those in here, and let's go ahead and take our gate out and run that into the CV Analyzer. So, okay, I'm going to turn Use Audio off, and now it's going to start using our gate here. And you can see, I'll zoom a little bit. See, this is kind of doing what we've got going on here. Let me reduce the number of steps here. We'll take that down to 8, and I'll hold down Shift and make a few of these connect over. And you can see, this is what the gate out is doing, is basically echoing the gate in, because we're using just a regular gate switch for that. If you're using MIDI, like audio's off and we don't have a gate, we're just using MIDI, this is not going to do anything. You can see nothing's happening. I'm hitting notes, I'm getting triggers, but nothing's happening over here. If you want to use those MIDI notes somehow, I'm sure you can figure out, there's plenty of ways and reason to do that. However, if we are using audio as our triggering, then we will do something. And this actually really lets us, so the matrix doesn't have anything to do with it now. Now this is basically, we're taking we're always going to send a full strength signal out. You can see the max is 127. It just goes full strength, whether it's a quiet note or a loud one. Whenever we pass that threshold and we say, okay, we got a trigger, we're going to pass it along through the gate out. Now, we will hold that until we get below the deadband for the release time. So if I play a note here, you can see the release time's fast, And in fact, if the release time's too fast, we're getting, let me zoom here. So we actually get all these extra triggers. You can really see what's going on with the detection. If I lower the deadband, we should get a little bit less. We're saying we need to get to a much lower strength signal. But because this signal is kind of low frequency and it's got a lot of wobbling going on, it's actually, if we set that release time short, I mean, the strength of that signal is wildly varying, at least when you analyze it at rapid speeds. So you can see we're getting a lot of triggers. Now, when I change the release time, you can see now that doesn't, now it's going to wait a little longer. So, it's not going to get triggered over and over again. If I put this all the way up, I can play a short note and it'll hold that for a while. So whenever we get that threshold released, where we passed the release time, we were below the deadband, that'll go out. You can also see if I do something like, here we've got a fairly long enough release time. If I crank the deadband up though, I might still get some extra triggers just because that signal it doesn't have to drop much at all. So when it sort of wobbles down below the threshold, we'll get some other triggers. But that's basically how your gate out works. One thing you can do with this, it's kind of nice, is you could use that to, of course you use it for anything, but you could throw another PanHandler below here. If we wanted to do something with another signal or whatever, we could chain them together. Or if we wanted to do like a different thing with the left channel, the incoming left channel and the incoming right channel, you can just take that gate out and we can just chain these together like that. And then just make sure the audio switches off on this one. We'll go ahead and echo the gate out to the CV analyzer so we can see it. So you can see both of these guys get triggered, but these are at different speeds. You can do something really interesting with one of them goes fast and the other one goes slow. Also, regardless of whether the trigger would be accepted by the PanHandler based on retriggering in the current pan, it's always going to send it out. It's basically anytime that light would light up, it's going to get sent out. All right, I think I spent enough time on that. Let's look at these CV inputs now. And I'll go ahead and just delete this one. I'll keep things somewhat simple. If you hover over the CV inputs, you'll start to see your comments. You got to go right over the knob there. A few of these are going to say things like, it's probably better if I knew ahead of time. Here's one that says override. Okay, so in general, CV signals are bipolar on the PanHandler. So anything we're accepting as an input, except for very few exceptions. And actually, the outputs in general tend to be unipolar, and they always comment that though. So the default is bipolar, and it won't say anything if that's the case. But if it's something like an override, or if it's a unipolar signal, excuse me, then we will say that in the comment or in the tooltip. So essentially the way all of these inputs work, if you look at something like time or phase or exaggeration, these are signals that have a kind of a center position, and you can go all the way somewhere to the left, you can go somewhere to the right. If you send a full strength CV signal in, and your knob or your slider is dead center, then you will be able to sweep that knob via CV. You'll be able to sweep that knob from the lowest value to the highest value. Basically, those are the limits. So like a -1 CV signal is going to say, take it all the way from halfway to the left side, and an input of 1 is going to say, or we could call it 127, I guess. That's the way we tend to look at them as MIDI, but internally they're really just -1 and +1. So if we send that full strength signal, full positive signal, we'll go from the center over to there. And then basically, if we reduce that amount, then we'll be less than that. And if our knob that we're starting with, or our slider, is off center to begin with, then we're only going to go, like if I'm, let's say 3/4 of the way over here, and I'm sending a full strength signal, I'll go down to 1/4, or we could say minus halfway. Here it's plus halfway. So I'll go from here and I'll sweep down there. I'll go up to the top, and then I'll kind of hold there, because really that signal is kind of getting pushed up to here and below. But of course we're clipping it because it doesn't mean anything if it's more than the maximum. So that's how all those CV inputs work. I will note that many of these things, well, basically all of them, you're not going to see any animation on the front panel because you're doing that. Like we could send, let's send a curve from the matrix. Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll make a curve that goes like this. Something like that. I can send that to like my phase, for instance. Let's send the curve over to phase. And so if you look at the lights here, you can see we're settling into different places because the phase is moving that curve. If I actually moved it here, you could see where that finish point would be moving to, right? I can see it from the feedback here because I'm doing that. Now, if you wanted to actually see that, you wanted to watch this curve moving, then you would have to do a trick with your combinator. So we could actually take that curve. We need to see a little bit more. Oh no, yeah. Let's see. Look at the programmer. Let's go ahead and take the curve CV. We'll run it into CV1 here, and it's bipolar. That's fine. And then we could go into our programmer and say, for this guy, let's go ahead and assign CV input 1, and we'll go to the pan curve phase. And then you can see it. Essentially, that's what we were doing if we take that and just connect it to the phase there. So, and of course, I'm going only positive here. Oh, right. So actually what I would like to do is flip this around and say, let's do bipolar. Now we'll go negative as well. And of course, we could make this a lot longer and do all kinds of stuff. But that allows you to visualize kind of what will be happening. Of course, the amount that we set the trim is going to affect that as well. We could, if we want to visualize that, we'll just turn this to the same setting as we've got down here. But those are fairly straightforward. Pretty much just about everything. We don't do it for the note detection, but just about everything else on here has a CV input. So let's discuss for a second the ones that are like direction here, which you'll note says override. What that's saying is what I mentioned before, and let me I'm gonna shut this thing off, and let's put this back in the middle. So what I mentioned before about override is that these are a little bit different in the way they're handled. So whereas the phase says, if I'm in the center and I send a full signal, it'll move all the way to the left, all the way to the right, or it'll take a knob that's dead center and it'll move it, all the way to the minimum and all the way up to the maximum. If we have an override, it basically doesn't matter where we have the setting, and that basically just applies, I believe, to the time tweak and the direction, and probably the sync as well. Do I have inputs for those? No, I don't think I have inputs for those. So we're basically just looking at the time tweak, the cross. There we go. The other ones are, so it's the direction, the time tweak, and the cross, which is the delay cross. Those are overrides. So doesn't matter where this direction switch is, if I'm going to send, let's use a curve CV because they're bipolar. I'll send a curve CV to the direction. Basically, the top third is going to be equivalent to right to left. The middle third is going to be the center position, which is alternating, and the bottom third is going to be the left to right. So we can kind of observe that if we take our gate and run it in here, so we can trigger this repeatedly so we could see what's going on. Okay, I'm going to switch these gates back to at a regular pace. So here we are. We're alternating left, right, left, right. Okay. Now, if I put the curve up here all the time, you can see we're going left to right, because this is the high setting. Okay. If I put the curve somewhere near the middle, then we'll alternate. And if I put the curve down in the bottom section, we'll go right to left. So you can see here, like we'll go right to left until we get to this, and then we'll alternate. So then we'll switch back and forth. So that's how the override works, and that's the same thing you can do with the time tweak, which has 3 settings. And the delay cross is basically just on and off. So that one is, I will demo it. Well, it's not going to be easy for us to see it. But essentially, if I'm down in the lower half here, if I have a negative value or a 0 value, it'll be off. And if I do something up here, that's turning it on. Of course, you may be using something other than a matrix to send the signal, but it'll behave pretty much the same way. Okay, so now let's get into what I think is kind of the most interesting part of this, which you might be surprised how much time I spent on the not that interesting part. But it's all interesting to someone who's technical like I am, and hopefully to you too. So our CV outputs, let's see, well, we have an envelope. That would be a good one to look at. That's a unipolar signal. Most of these are unipolar. We already looked at the gate out. The envelope is going to take some of the signal processing that we're doing for our audio and send it out as a CV signal. So the best way for us to look at that is to just go ahead and use the CV analyzer. And let's send some noise to it. So you can see we're kind of looking at our signal strength here. It doesn't really matter what our threshold setting does. What matters is the input that we're sending to it. So if I would, let's shrink this matrix since we don't need to look at that anymore. And I'll change the level of the subtractor. Make it louder, make it quieter. It's basically just taking the audio analysis that we're doing here when we have an audio signal coming in and sending it out as a CV. Let's do a quick test. Of course, that's only going to happen if we have the use audio switch on. But lots of fun stuff you can do with that. Hook it up to a filter or something like that, voltage controlled filter. Let's turn this around again, and I'm going to explain these 3 signals that are called pan position, pan amount, and pan percent. And let's try to do that in a visual way. A good way to illustrate that would be to take let's take a vocoder and drop it down below here. I'm not gonna do any auto routing. Okay, and let's make this a 4-band so we can see fairly well. And then we'll go to our combinator, and I'll send out pan position to the first CV. That one is, if we hover over here, now I can see, that one is bipolar, so we'll leave this on bipolar. The pan amount is a unipolar signal, so I'll run that to 2, and I'll flip the switch down, and the pan percent is also a unipolar signal. I'll run that to 3, and I'll flip that switch down. So essentially what these do is the pan position is basically what's happening with our lights here. So 0 is center, and -1 is left, or, like the left input, the A input, and +1 is right. Or I guess, well, yeah, maybe we call those 127. If you look at the CV analyzer or something like that, we're using MIDI numbers, so that's actually -127 to +127. So let's go into our programmer though, and we'll say for the vocoder, let's send CV input 1 to filter band level 1. And we'll do CV input 2 to band level 2. This is a nice way to visualize all these at once. And we'll do CV3 to band level 3. Okay, that's what we needed for that. So now if I send some audio into here, we'll see some stuff happening. Let's slow our pan time down so we can observe it more slowly. Okay, so if you watch these lights here, let's put our phase to center. I'm trying to. Okay, I must have something going into that. Let me... Okay, let's go to our programmer again and just remove that. Let's take that away. And I guess this too, no target. That should allow us to get back to putting the phase in the middle. Okay, so if I send some sound in here, we're going to see as these lights are moving left to right, number 1 is our pan position. And you can see this is bipolar, and it'll go, you know, it'll go to the top when we're on the right. It'll go to the bottom when we're on the left. So that tracks the actual position that we're calculating. And of course, it responds to the pan speed. So if we do it faster, it moves faster. If I wanted to do like my, oh yeah, let's take that matrix away again. Let's take away the input to, I think I already did, didn't I? Yeah, I think so. So it's just because my direction switch was there. Okay, so no, it doesn't seem to be responding to my direction. There we go. Okay. So now if I'm always going right to left, every time I get a new trigger, I'm going to go right to left there. That could also be from our gate signal. Doesn't matter where the trigger's coming from, of course. So, but we'll put it up here so we can hear it. Now, the second signal is called the pan amount. And then we have a pan percent. The difference between these two is that the pan percent is linear. It goes from 0 to 1. So as we start a pan, it's basically following the time scale, which is at a fixed rate. So when we get halfway through our pan time, we're going to be halfway up on this meter, regardless of what the curve looks like. But the pan amount also reflects the curve. So that's basically, it's kind of like an absolute value of this signal here, the pan position. It says, you know, how far through our pan are we? So let me illustrate that. We'll do a slow pan, and let's make a curve that starts out by, okay, so time's moving, but the pan isn't moving much. So this is a curve where it starts out moving slowly, and then it speeds up at the end. We'll send a signal in. The percent is moving at a steady clip, but this one starts out slow and then speeds up as we get toward the end of the pan. Okay. If we did something like this, where we start fast, hang around in the middle, and then speed up again at the end, well, it's going to be interesting, because you're going to see this one is going to move to the middle quickly, hang out, and then move up. So the difference between these two is, like, if I want an effect to every time I pan, whether I'm going from the left to the right or the right to the left, if I wanted to use the CV signal to like modulate an effect in some way and say, yeah, we want a little bit of it, or this one too, you know, I want every time I start a pan, regardless of whether I'm going left to right or whether I'm going right to left, I want the effect to, you know, start in one place and finish in another place. If I use this signal, I could have, you know, when I'm on the left side, maybe I have the effect is clean, and on the right side it's dirty or something like that. And it's always going to be like that, regardless of, you know, if the pan goes left to right, it's going to go from clean to dirty. And if it goes from right to left, it's going to go from dirty to clean. If I use one of these signals, I can have it go like clean to dirty as it moves over. And then when I get a new note, it'll go clean to dirty again. There's plenty you can do. I'm sure you all have better imaginations than I do, and you're going to come up with some great things to use these CVs for. But it really, I think that provides a lot of interesting possibilities, because you can have your signal moving in the stereo field and also changing character. Again, I should mention as well, remember that left and right is that's just what we're used to calling these, but it's really, it's 2 channels. So you can do something like, have the left channel go out to one effect, have the right channel go out to another one, and then you could use the PanHandler just to morph, and you could actually do something else with those signals. Instead of sending them to the left channel and the right channel, you could maybe combine them into mono or something, or add a stereo effect after that. And the PanHandler could just be the thing that allows you to transition from, that triggers a transition from one type of sound to another. Sometimes I get excited about this stuff. It's pretty cool. Okay, I think we've mostly covered. There's really only a couple more things, and they're fairly straightforward. We have to sends and returns for the delay. So, if you're mixing in some delay, let me do a quick demo here. All right, let's make a faster pan and a quick delay. Let's go here. Let's make this curve a little straighter. And let's go alternating directions. Okay, there's something we can mess around with. So let's take that and let's just we'll throw in a scream down here. Flip the rack around. We'll send this in and we'll send the output back to the return. And now what does it sound like? Okay. Something I was going to warn you about. Okay. Yeah, of course, when you do something like that and you're mixing in, if you got to make sure you're not boosting your signal too much or you're going to get something crazy like that. But that's the fun of Reason, isn't it? This ability to flip things around and hook cables and experiment. And, sometimes your experiments lead to surprises and what you might call failures. But sometimes failures are really happy accidents. So if we have a decent signal level here, then we can have our, notice how because we're using feedback too, we're getting like progressively more damaged echoes from our feedback or from our delay. So you can have a lot of fun with that, I'm sure. Of course, we have audio ins, audio outs. Those are on pretty much everything that needs to do something with sound. And then right here, we have a switch that allows us to sum our left and right audio inputs. By default, that switch is off, which means, like in this case, we're using a subtractor, which is a mono instrument. So we're taking that signal that comes into the left channel and it becomes both the left and the right input. We're just copying it. But if you had a stereo instrument, if the left signal, the left channel and the right channel were very different from each other, the PanHandler, by default, with the switch off, is actually just going to, when you're listening to what's on the left side, you're just going to listen to whatever that left input is. And when it pans over to the right, you're going to hear the right input. So if there's something stereo in that signal, it's going to change as you go from left to right. If you want to just sum that and then let the PanHandler do the stereo stuff, then you can turn that switch on and it'll take whatever you've got coming in your left and right channels, add them together, and then that's what it'll sweep from the left to the right side. Okay, wow. I believe we're all the way at the end here. Here's another switch, but this is just decorative, so there's nothing I can tell you about that. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you made it to the end, congratulations. I think this rack extension is probably for you. Again, this is Todd with the Instrument Panel. This has been a demo of the back panel of the PanHandler. Have a great day. Thanks.